in the chamber on the floor when they called his name here. And one reason why, perhaps, is that what a lot of members have been calculating about is they've been weighing whether to vote no. They don't want to be the decisive vote. A number of these members are indicating that perhaps, Jake, that they could be no at the end of this roll call. Let's listen.
Jordan. Davids of Kansas. Jeffries. Davidson. Jordan. Davis of Illinois. Jeffries. Davis of North Carolina.
So the next one we're really listing in for is Congressman Anthony D'Esposito, a Republican of New York. He, last time we checked with him, was undecided. He is in a district that President Biden won by 15 points. He's the Republican in the most Biden-friendly district. And then right after him comes Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who is in a strong Trump district, but he's a no. So let's listen in. They're both coming right up.
DeSaulnier. Jeffries. Desjardins. Jordan. D'Esposito. Zelton. Diaz-Balart. Scalise.
So with that vote for Steve Scalise from Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida, and the unusual vote from Congressman Anthony D'Esposito from New York for former Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York, who ran and lost a race for governor. That is 4 House Republican votes against Jim Jordan, which means Jim Jordan will not win the speakership on this vote. Now, whether that means, unless they change their votes, which will mean, again, unless they change their votes, that he will not win the speakership. Now, whether he wins in a subsequent vote could happen. That's what happened with McCarthy. It also could happen, as what happened with Steve Scalise behind closed doors, that he could find his votes eroding. There are still other votes to pay attention to, including Jake Ellzey, and this vote is not over yet. And we'll see how big the margin of defeat ultimately is. 5 votes now against Jordan. What was the one I missed? Was that Jake Ellzey? What was?
Emmer.
I didn't hear.
That would have been in
the alphabetically. That's in there. Yes.
In any case, let's continue to watch. But that's already 5 against when he could only afford to lose 3.
We should also just watch that whole present thing. You heard Manu talk about at the back, if indeed they change the math here. So this is obviously 2 more Jake. He's lost 2 more votes than he could afford to lose here. If indeed everyone who's there today and took attendance that they were there is voting in this process. But we'll see if that magic number changes and if some later folks end up voting present, if we see that strategy come to fruition for the Jordan folks.
But John King, I mean,
Ferguson.
You know, this was basically Jim Jordan, who is the one who brought this to the floor, to force it to the floor. I want to vote. This was basically his, remember Kevin McCarthy, when Matt Gaetz said, I'm going to do a motion to vacate. And I think I'm quoting him correctly, that Kevin McCarthy said, bring it on. Is that what he said? Bring it on. And he got brought on, and he lost. And this was Jim Jordan doing the same thing. Steve Scalise did not bring it to the floor.
Because Steve Scalise didn't want to have to do what Kevin McCarthy did, which was keep negotiating away your power. Keep cutting deals that give away every piece of leverage, every power, every voice of authority you have as the quote-unquote CEO, the Speaker of the Republican Conference. Also important to note, this person's third in line to the presidency. This is a constitutional officer. This is not just the leader of House Republicans, whether you're a Democrat or independent or Republican watching in the country or around the world. This is a constitutional officer, third in line to the presidency. But so that the size of that 5, the others, the size of that at the end is significant. Because how many people does Jim Jordan have to negotiate with, right? We've heard one member wants him to come out publicly strongly say, Joe Biden won the election, Donald Trump lost, and he should stop making that case. Others want a commitment for money for Ukraine. Others want a public commitment, for an aid package to Israel.
Let's listen in because we've got Matt Gaetz coming up.
Jordan. Fulcher. Jordan. Gates. Jordan.
Okay, there are a couple others I
Gallagher.
want to hear in just
Jordan.
the next minute. Andrew
Gallego.
Garbarino and
Jeffries.
Carlos Jimenez, both of them
Garamendi.
are coming up in the next minutes.
Jeffries.
Let's just listen in.
Garbarino. Zeldin.
Zeldin for Garbarino. That's 6 against Jordan so far from House Republicans.
Mike Garcia. Jordan. Robert Garcia. Jeffries. Garcia of Illinois. Jeffries. Garcia of Texas. Jeffries. Jimenez. McCarthy.
Okay, John King, I'm sorry, but that's 7 House Republicans.
And so
Golden of
if you
May.
have to get that number to 2,
Graves of Louisiana. Jordan. Graves of Missouri. Jordan. Green of Tennessee. Jordan. Green of Texas. Jeffries. Green of Georgia. Jordan. Griffith. Jordan. Grijalva. Jeffries. Grothman. Jordan. Guest. Jordan. Guthrie. Jordan. Hageman. Jordan. Harder of California. Jeffries. Harris. Jordan. Harshbarger. Jordan. Hayes.
All right, you've been listening live there on Capitol Hill. They're going through the members alphabetically on the Hill, voting to elect the next House Speaker. Right now, it does not appear Jim Jordan has the votes for the speakership. At last count, it was 8. We just had the 8th Republican to vote against Jim Jordan. So perhaps the takeaway so far, John, is not Jordan not going through on this first vote, but there's more no votes from Republicans than perhaps anybody was expecting here so far.
Yeah, 9 looks like at last count. You got 3 for Scalise, 3 for McCarthy, 2 for Lee Zeldin, 1 for Mike Garcia. So it doesn't look like there's any way that Jim Jordan is going to get this on the first vote. The big question is, Sandra, how many votes are we going to go through before either Jim Jordan is elected speaker or they decide to go to backup plan number 2? Let's bring in Chad Pergram on Capitol Hill. He's been watching all of this. If not Jordan, Chad, then who and when?
Well, what we want to know is, does Jim Jordan and do Republicans stand behind having a second ballot? By rule, you're supposed to go to a second ballot immediately, but these are different circumstances here. There's a level of desperation in Congress trying to get a speaker because of what's been going on for the past 2 weeks, what's been going on in the Middle East. They can't vote on anything. But right now, that delta, even though we're still relatively early in that roll call vote, as you stated, Jim Jordan does not have the math. The magic number today today was going to be 216. There's a total of 432 members. Let me just check something here. Yeah, 216 was going to be the number here. There's one absence, Gus Bilirakis, a Republican of Florida, who's for Jim Jordan. He's not here right now. And so you draw down that number as to how many people you needed for somebody voting for candidates by name. And right now you have several votes for Steve Scalise. You have several votes for Kevin McCarthy. You have votes for Mike Garcia, a Republican of California. So right now, is this just a protest vote by these members who don't like Jim Jordan or think that Steve Scalise was treated rather poorly by his Republican colleagues last week after he got the nomination? And do they say, all right, it's not going to be Jim Jordan? I was told this morning that if Jim Jordan could not wrap this up on the first or second ballot, that some of these other people might say, it's time to move on, let's do something else. And this is where I will direct you to what Mike Kelly, the Republican from Pennsylvania, he drafted a resolution which would empower the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry, to become the acting speaker so they could get on with business here in the House, trying to fund the government next month, addressing the crisis in the Middle East. They can't do any of these things right now until they get a speaker. But the question is whether or not Jim Jordan wants to continue to push the issue. He has the same problem that Kevin McCarthy had. He has by far and away most of the Republican conference. That's the issue. But can he get over that delta? It's a very special mixture of votes that you need to have to become elected Speaker of the House. And we don't know the magic number until they get completely through the entire alphabet here, because we don't know how many people actually will cast ballots. Ken Buck, a Republican of Colorado, who definitely expressed in the past 24 hours some problems that he had with Jim Jordan, and for that matter, Steve Scalise, he did not vote when his name was called. You had Don Bacon, the Republican from Nebraska, who certainly was upset at the treatment that Steve Scalise got. He was the first one out of the ballot here, and he voted for Kevin McCarthy. At one point when I asked him last night, I said, you're going to be probably alphabetically the first person up in the alphabet who might be on the fence. How will you vote? And he said, yeah, I wish my name was Zakin with a Z, not Bacon, but he was the first one out of the batch here. So, right now, unless something changes or members vote present, I'll say that again, if members were to switch their vote, which they can, or they vote present, which diminishes the threshold for what you need to vote for Speaker, that would lower the threshold. And at some point here, would you have, and this is just, me reading the tea leaves, could you have maybe some members say, okay, let's vote for president, even though we're for Jim Jordan, do we vote present because that lowers the threshold? That's possible, although they're doing this in real time. Sometimes it's hard parliamentarily to call a play like that. It's like calling an audible on the football field. That's a pretty extreme call to make, but maybe they would say, okay, let's just go to a second ballot and try it again, if John and Sandra, they think those votes are within range.
Just as you've been speaking, there are some House members who are saying that they're aware, apparently, that several of the members will change their votes in the next go-around from yes to no, if there's a second round here coming up. Dave Joyce, the Republican from Ohio, stayed quiet on his vote, missed his name in the roll call. John James missed his name in the roll call. We'll have to make it up in the back end. So we're left wondering what happens next here, Chad, and if indeed perhaps you're going to tell me it looks more unlikely by the minute that they'll go directly into a second roll call here.
I think that that's a decision they have to make on the fly. I mean, we saw what happened with Kevin McCarthy, where you had a clear nominee who was, within the range of getting to the votes, where they went time after time again, sometimes 2 and 3 roll call votes a day. This is a little bit different if maybe they think, okay, these members are gettable. This was a protest vote on this first vote. Maybe we take a timeout, we put names into nomination, and we do it again. The flip side of doing that immediately is that you might harden some of the opposition, the people who are really against Jim Jordan. Or what you could do is, by forcing the issue, the phone calls start to come in, the emails start to come in. I could not begin to characterize the level of pressure that is about 40 feet away from me inside the House chamber right now, because they will really start to work on these folks, crack knuckles, twist arms. They talk about this on Capitol Hill all the time. They rarely actually do it. This could be one of the instances where they do, because they say, we are in a desperate situation here. We don't have a functioning House of Representatives, and we need to get a Speaker of the House. But could some of those members be turned, or do they harden their position? Sandra, the flip side is here, if they were to take a timeout and go away, does that actually help Jim Jordan? Maybe they recalibrate, they go and talk to these people, say, what do you need? What do you want? What could we do to make it better? Or does that timeout actually make the dissension grow? That's a hard scenario to read right now. It could go either way. And the fact that they have not had a Speaker of the House for 2 weeks, we have not been in this position since 1849. Hal Cobb, back in 1849, became Speaker after a 2-week hiatus. Although he won finally on the 63rd roll call vote, the House has not been voting. This is the first roll call vote for Speaker since they deposed Kevin McCarthy 2 weeks ago today, Sandra and John.
11.
All right. And when you take a look at it, we're a little past the halfway mark, it would look. Nobody has voted present yet, but we do have 4 votes for Scalise, 5 for McCarthy, and 4 others. That'd be Garcia and Zeldin. So it's not looking good for Jim Jordan on this first go around. Let's bring in our chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor, Byron York. Byron, as Chad pointed out, 2 weeks without a speaker here. When are they going to get this done?
Luna.
Well, right now, I think we shouldn't underplay the importance of emotion in this vote right now, because the people who are voting against Jim Jordan, they were angry with how Kevin McCarthy was treated. And then they were angry with how Steve Scalise was treated. And some of them feel they're sure not going to let Jim Jordan sail through on the first ballot. Maybe they'll vote for him later. Maybe this could change later. But this is almost a statement they're making of how unhappy they are. At the same time, they're also likely to be in that caucus that says, this is crazy, this is embarrassing, we need a speaker, let's move on, so that ultimately they would be more likely to vote for him. So I'm going to look to see if after a ballot or two, some of them are going to say, well, we made our point, and now let's elect Jordan Speaker.
Really interesting here. So now the tally, 13 House Republicans, Byron, have voted against Jim Jordan. The emotions of the moment is an interesting observation, with many standing up, casting their votes with enthusiasm or lack thereof. Byron, what do you think is going to happen here? I mean, Chad's saying it's really and sort of an unprecedented moment. We can't really predict if they're going to go into a second vote. But if he's now got 13, by last tally, 13 Republicans in the no category for Jordan, it's probably unlikely they would move into a second round here.
I think so. I think what we've seen in this first ballot, there are more no votes than I was thinking would happen. We're at now, 13 no votes. And if you remember, there was a lot of speculation ahead of time that the people who would be against Jim Jordan would be called the moderates in the House versus the bomb throwers in the House who deposed Kevin McCarthy. And so the idea was that the bomb throwers were really hardcore. They were going to vote against Kevin McCarthy, bring down the House, no matter what the consequences were. And the feeling about the moderates was they would cave at some point. They would say, this is crazy. The House needs to go on. We don't really, Jim Jordan is not our first or our second choice, but we really need to move on and get a speaker. Now, what we're seeing now is a stronger display of opposition than some had thought. And I think clearly Chad was saying, it's either going to get stronger or get weaker after this first vote. And we're just going to have to wait and see.
All right. So McCarthy wasn't pure enough. Scalise wasn't pure enough. If Jordan's not acceptable, where do they go to next? Tom Emmer, somebody else?
Yeah, that's always been a possibility. And it happens in politics sometimes when you have these two candidates who are locked in a death match, and then sometimes neither one of them gets it and somebody else does. I think the possibility that Chad was talking about actually changing the rules a bit and letting Patrick McHenry stay on as Speaker pro tem with some of the powers of the speakership. I think that would take a lot of Democratic input to do, but it might be a possibility if somebody says, look, we're having so much trouble getting a speaker, do we have to have a Speaker of the House to do some of the things that we need? Or is it a roadblock that we simply cannot get around? No way, no how. Can't address the Israel-Hamas situation, can't address Ukraine aid, can't address a government shutdown that is coming down the tracks. We can't do any of that until we have a speaker. So this is going to be very, very tense and very emotional, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a possibility of a third candidate coming out of somewhere.
All right, Byron, if you could stand by with us on the breaking news. We are looking live on Capitol Hill, where as the vote continues, we now know it is unlikely that Jim Jordan will win the speakership on this first vote, at least. Chad Pergam is standing by, our congressional correspondent. Chad, what do you know?
Well, nothing is ever final until it's final. Again, when they go through these roll call votes, until they go back through the alphabet. Remember, I noted that Ken Buck, the Republican from Colorado, did not vote, so he'll get to vote at the end. And they will also ask if members want to change their vote. So while it appears unlikely right now that Jim Jordan is going to wrap this up on the first ballot, and this would compel them to go to a second ballot, you could have members maybe keep the vote open, have some horse trading in the chamber there, some arm twisting, and maybe try to rally the troops. You say, okay, look, you made your point. Can you vote for Jordan, or can you switch to president? I would never rule that out in these circumstances, because this has been so wild up here over the past couple of weeks. Some of these members are absolutely opposed to Jim Jordan. I talked to one member last night who indicated that they thought that how Steve Scalise was treated by the Jordan acolytes was, quote, disqualifying. And so based on my conversation with that member, they didn't think that they would ever get that particular member. But one wonders, again, this is being played live on the field. This is like a sporting event. You don't know what is truly going to happen until they go to that final gun, until they blow that whistle. This vote is live. This vote is hot. And those members could be persuaded. Are they persuadable? That is an unknown. That would really be the test of Jim Jordan and his power, potentially, if he's going to be an effective Speaker of the House, to be able to bring those people across the finish line at the last minute. That was one of the knocks that Mario Diaz-Balart, the Republican from Florida, who opposed Jim Jordan here today on the floor, he said, look, after Steve Scalise got the nomination the other day, he threw his Jim Jordan threw his support to Steve Scalise, and then the Jordan people didn't follow. He said, really, how strong a leader is him? He said that maybe tells you the level of control that he has over those members. And so does Jim Jordan have enough political juice to, whether it be on the floor now while this roll call vote is still open, or maybe afterwards or later tonight or tomorrow, to bring those folks across the floor? That remains to be seen, John and Sam.
Jeffries.
All right, Chad, I get the sense that whenever you go to the horse races, you put a couple of bucks in the long shot just for fun. So we'll see how this goes. Chad,
you're
we'll
right
get
about
back
that.
to you. Thanks. Yeah, now this.
Rose. Jordan. Rosendale. Jordan. Ross. Jeffries. Rouser. Jordan. Roy. Jordan. Ruiz. Jeffries. Rupersberger. Jeffries. Rutherford. Scalise. Ryan. Jeffries. Salazar. Jordan. Salinas. Jeffries. Sanchez. Jeffries. Santos, Jordan. Sarbanes, Jeffries. Scalise, Jordan. Scanlon, Jeffries. Schakowsky, Jeffries. Schiff, Jeffries. Schneider, Jeffries. Skolton, Jeffries. Schreier, Jeffries. Schweikert, Jordan. Austin Scott, Jordan. David Scott, Jeffries. Scott of Virginia, Jeffries. Self, Jordan. Sessions, Jordan. Sewell, Jeffries. Sherman, Jeffries. Sherrill, Jeffries. Simpson, Scalise. Slotkin, Jeffries. Smith of Missouri, Jordan. Smith of Nebraska, Jordan. Smith of New Jersey, Jordan. Smith of Washington, Jeffries. Smucker, Jordan. Sorensen, Jeffries. Soto, Jeffries. Spanberger, Jeffries. Sparks, Sparks. Stansbury, Jeffries. Stanton, Jeffries. Stauber, Jordan. Steele, Jordan. Stefanik, Jordan. Style, Jordan. Stubbe, Jordan. Stevens, Jeffries. Strickland, Jeffries. Strong, Jordan. Swalwell, Jeffries. Sykes, Jeffries. Takano, Jeffries. Tenney, Jordan. Tanadar, Jeffries. Thompson of California, Jeffries. Thompson of Mississippi, Jeffries. Thompson of Pennsylvania, Jordan. Tiffany, Jordan. Timmons, Jordan. Titus, Jeffries. Talib,
All right, finally here, everybody. I just needed a little extra time, so I played that video by Aaron. Actually, our editor, Aaron put that together, just so you know. So some of this, when we ask for donations, when we're raising money, it's for work like this. It's not just for the editing. Sorry, I'm turning down these other sounds that are in my ear. The reason I had to join a little late, because for whatever reason, I thought the vote was going to be late. So the show and the graphic and everything is not even ready. Then I get home from making a run and I see like that they're already voting. So I'm like, oh shit, let me go ahead and at least get the count going, and then I'll join once I'm able to, get out the shower and everything. So my apologies for that. But again, this is a absolutely fabulous video that Aaron came up with. Now it's time to get to the commentary about the speaker, and then I may have a couple of stories to cover and be out of here. But I thought it was important that RBN gets a little live coverage of what's happening on the Capitol. So let's close that and let's move to the live coverage right now. I guess let's go to what coverage do I want to get? Let's start with C-SPAN, and then I'll go to some of the cable networks here just to get the count, because it's getting, is it close or is there still voting? No, they're tallying now. So this is where it's at. Jordan has 199. Now, when the speaker or when Kevin McCarthy, let's see what they say here.
The House will come to order. The reading clerk will now call the names of the members who did not answer the first call of the roll.
Okay, so the people who didn't answer before, they're going to answer now and see what he gets. Now, when CNN was talking earlier, they said a very important threshold was him reaching 200 votes, because that's where Kevin McCarthy started. Kevin McCarthy started at the 200 vote. I'll bring up the CNN coverage now to see what they're saying about that. It's very slanted. I tried to show both. I show CNN, I show Fox, and you can see the slanted coverage of this very exact same thing. But I'm going to bring up CNN and see what they're saying about that threshold they made. And let's see if there's any vote changing. I can see Jeffrey's got another vote. So his just increased by 1. Where is CNN at? Let's go live to CNN and see what they're saying. Maybe they've addressed him hitting, because I would say 199 is pretty close to 200. Because they said that would mean he has a good chance of getting those people. Jordan just went up to 200. So interesting here. So I'm going to switch this out now and bring in the network, or sorry, the cable news coverage. C-SPAN is a little bit ahead. So CNN is just now reporting that it's about to hit 200, whereas C-SPAN had already reported that. So let's go to CNN here, and let me close this other one, or at least mute it in the background. I just muted. All right, so let's see here.
Massey.
He's at 200. We're gonna see. Now, if you've been watching now, I think maybe out of all the members, I've been probably the most interested in this. I covered it the last time they had some sort of big thing that happened. I covered it. I don't know. I find it interesting, the process here. But CNN's coverage has been very slanted to where they they slander him, I guess, or smear. I don't know, whatever word you want to use, depending on your
the
perspective.
opposition
You'll listen
to
in how they cover him. They didn't
Jim
want
Jordan
him
picked up 4
to get to
votes
this
there.
point.
He had
They were
16
pushing for
originally,
Steve
and then
Scalise
in
when he
the
was still in. They
what
were
before in the,
heartbroken when some people who
absent
came on
votes,
their network and said hell no to
Ken
Jim
Buck
Jordan, and they flipped.
voted for Tom Emmer. Congressman John James of Michigan voted for Tom Cole.
So this is
And
the
Dakota
threshold that
Sparks
Kevin
and,
McCarthy
Congressman
reached.
LaMalfa all
Let's see
voted
what they
for
say about
candidates
that if they
other
bring
than Jim
that up.
Jordan. That's 20 no votes on Jordan. Adam Kinzinger, David Chalian was making this observation earlier, which is what we seem to be hearing very much in a loud voice is from these 20 congressmen is please do not make Jim Jordan the symbol of the House Republicans.
Here we go. There's been very much
correct.
coverage like
Look,
this,
I'm
like it
impressed
was
that there's
almost
20. I was
ridiculous and
worried
silly.
this morning because a lot of the hard opposition to Jordan had been capitulating in the last 24 hours. I think of like Mike Rogers from Alabama, Ann Wagner from Missouri. They were hell no's until they were all in. This is embarrassing for Jim Jordan. And I think this is going to be hard for him to fix. I mean, the only thing I can imagine is if he starts cutting deals, and those deals include things that he's never supported in the past. For instance, if he says, I'm committed to bringing Ukraine funding on the floor, he may be able to peel off 1 or 2 of those. If he says, I'm committed to whatever it is, I don't know. Maybe he can get to his number, but I think this is hard. I think the free vote here, I mean, you know,
They better just hope it doesn't go up by 1 or 2 more.
Jordan the first time and then go away the second time. So I think you could see even more peel away.
And then I think I'm going to do a story,
where he consolidates. Who really knows? But I think it's
a crystal ball story.
I'm speaker now. But
Emma
that
Vigeland
doesn't
crystal
mean
ball
they're not gonna
story.
use blistering pressure
We're going to
on
check in
Fox
on what's
News,
happening in
Newsmax,
Palestine, of
all
course.
those OAN.
So we'll do a
to
couple of
activate
things
the
before I
base
get
and
out of
scare the
here. It
crap out
won't
of these
just
people.
be
There are a lot
about
of brave people in
this
those
speaker
comments that
vote.
I'm very proud of today.
20 no votes against Jim Jordan, at least in this first ballot. Dana Bash, I guess the question is, where do we go from here?
Let's see what Dana says.
Here, Jake,
I'm curious. She pronounces it
is,
Dana instead of Dana.
Despite the understanding that he was going to lose a fair amount in the first ballot, I just got a message from a Jordan ally saying, quote, this is much worse than we expected. So despite the bravado,
watch when I go to Fox News.
Said to Manu,
the description.
Umpteen times in the hallways over the past 24, 48 hours about the fact that he can get there. He not only didn't get there in the first round, but they expected to do better than losing 20 fellow Republicans, as they have done.
That's the same thing that happened to Kevin McCarthy. They set that threshold before the vote was done, too. And now they're describing it a different way.
There were 20, and he certainly lost people that weren't even on our list of people to watch. People like Congresswoman Granger and Congressman Gonzalez. Manu Raju, you have some reporting from the Hill. What's going on?
Yeah, the expectation is that Jim Jordan will try to get go to another roll call vote here. We'll see exactly when exactly he does this, but this is worse than they anticipated. Remember, Kevin McCarthy on that first ballot back in January lost 19.
They have zero shame in how they flip their narratives in the same broadcast.
Kevin McCarthy.
They have zero shame of that.
Votes right here.
Jeez.
And in talking to members who are walking off the floor, the belief is that
we have a Jim Jordan person. You say you like
some of these members that were surprised about
Jim Jordan. I must say I don't know much about Jim Jordan except for the Democratic caricatures of him.
That is an issue that's very important for the
always see him without wearing a jacket most times. That's what I know about Jim Jordan. He's the no jacket guy.
Former Congressman Lee Zeldin to be the Speaker of the House. Can they win some of those members back? The belief some of the Jordan folks is that perhaps they can win back some
Jim
of the
is more for the people, so of course they
okay.
So maybe
here, but
here's another person
despite this worse outcome
who
than they anticipated, they do
sort of positive
go to a second ballot,
feedback on Jordan.
Make up. That is still a huge question as we head into another period of uncertainty and the Republican turmoil only
but
continuing.
They hate him. So the things they bring up, and I'll switch
some votes from these 20. It's also possible that there were people that
I'm going to
Not to
switch.
being polite about it, that were holding their nose and voting for him, that
Oh my
might now
God.
be in.
Let me switch to the C-SPAN feed, and that is right here. So let me go to the C-SPAN feed, and then I'll try to bring up. I'll bring up Fox News in the background on the other one here, but this is really weird. So this is the non-biased viewpoint, C-SPAN. There's no commentary. And let's bring up Fox News. Now, of course, this is not good. He didn't win, but I think that was the expectation. When I covered it in the last segment, I covered this. He talked about when he was asked, he said, what happens if you don't win on the first vote? And he said, there will be a speaker today, is what he said. We shall see what happens, but that's what he said. Jim Jordan, that is. I want to make sure they're not on commercial before I put it back onto the screen. And somebody asked, the story for Crystal Ball that I have is that Emma Vigeland shouts out Crystal Ball for doing a great job. I guess she goes on some show. I can't remember if it was Newsmax or something like that. She goes on, and I guess she's the pro-Palestinian person. I guess the Zionist is the pro-Palestinian, but I guess since she asked for some things for Palestinians, that she is considered pro-Palestinian. Or anyway, she has some sort of debate with somebody, and just the framing is off, and Emma doesn't realize that because she is a sock dim. She doesn't realize that. Still hasn't come back on, everybody. Okay, looks like now I'm shooting the shit until we're back from commercial here. Okay, looks like they're back. All right, so I'm gonna switch out the C-SPAN and see what sort of commentary Fox News is giving here. So let's see what they are saying. Oh shit. They came back to Israel stuff, so I'm not going back. So I guess they've given up on covering this. So maybe I can move on to the story. What I'll do is I'll keep this in the background. I'll listen for any changes in the vote. So I'll listen for any changes in the vote. And if there is any changes or any updates, or if they announce that they will be
continue to await word from the House clerk, the
going for a
official
second
count,
vote,
but
a second round of
unofficially,
vote, then I'll go
Jim
ahead
Jordan
and bring this
not
back.
near the votes needed to win the speakership. Live coverage continues.
Let's see if
House
they
order.
let's see if they say right here before I go to the next story.
The tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 432, of which the Honorable Jim Jordan of the state of Ohio has received 200 votes. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212 votes.
So the story will be Hakeem Jeffries got more
The Honorable Kevin
votes
McCarthy of the state of California
than
has
Jordan.
received 6 votes. Lee Zeldin of the state of New York has received 3. The Honorable Steve Scalise of the state of Louisiana has received 7. The Honorable Mike Garcia of the state of California has received 1. The Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1. The Honorable Tom Cole of the state of Oklahoma has received 1. The Honorable Thomas Massey of the state of Kentucky has received 1. No person having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess subject to the call of the chair.
Let's see. Does this mean I'll have to go to a broadcast? Does this mean that there's no vote? I mean, there's no second round of vote? All right, so now they're talking with about the speaker again. So let's go now back to Fox News coverage and see what they're saying here. Let's see. Okay, here goes Fox. Let's unmute.
For Mr. Do you feel bad right now for Mr. Jordan? You threw his your support for him. Do you feel bad for him?
No. Don't over read into this. This is about the same vote I had on my first vote out. I were in the well. No. Let's go back to how it got here. We wouldn't be here.
Kevin's like, no. Let me tell you the story here.
That's it. No, Republicans voted against Jim Jordan today on the floor, including 2 votes from somebody who's not even a member anymore.
Every single Democrat and 8 Republicans voted to shut down one branch of government. That is why we're here today. There's no other reason why we're here today, but because of that. Now we had a vote on the floor. It didn't get to the whole point. Now we'll take a break, talk to people, and come back and solve it.
So how long is this going to be today?
They won't say because they have to go back and see what the talking results are.
You got Kevin McCarthy there, and now
he's kind of mad. I could have that job.
Chad, before they go
you
into
can tell he's kind of mad.
Takeaway from that.
I could not have that job.
That's what I was
I'd be like,
to
what,
get from
mother?
Kevin McCarthy here to try to understand. Were they going to vote right away? What was going to be the next step? He continues to go back to last week, 2 weeks ago, I should say, when he was bounced from the speakership. There were just enough Republicans who voted him out, ousting him as the speaker. He turned this back around on the Democrats. And this is where I asked him, I said, this is not really a Democrat's problem. You had, 15 people who voted for somebody else than the candidate who you endorsed as the Speaker of the House. You endorsed Jim Jordan today. That didn't happen. And you had votes
I'm
for
going to turn
Lee
down just a
Zeldin,
little bit here
former,
to read these super
Congressman
chats.
from,
All right, so this first one.
Tom Cole, the chairman of the Rules Committee, Thomas Massey, the congressman from Northern Kentucky. They were kind of all over the map right now. So going back and rehashing
Thanks for being on top of live streaming these historic votes. Y'all are providing a great service to the community. Watch The Watchmen. There we go. So thank you, DC, for that. Super chat. This is Natalie. One of my daughters almost was named Natalie. Natalie was in the final names choices. It lost, but yeah. Hey CJ, my debit card got hacked and couldn't change the account info, so I had to cancel through YouTube, but for a few dollars more, I signed up via Patreon. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Natalie.
Do you need to think this over?
Any way of supporting is always appreciated. This one right here from this is a sticker, yeah. Ron Do, and then here, same person, Ron Do also signs up for 7 months membership. Thank you, Ron, and that's enjoying every minute. Great work, RBN.
A lot of angst from these members as
awesome.
To whether or not they voted quote the right.
Glad everybody, or there's a certain segment that appreciates this sort of coverage.
Don Bacon, his name begins with a B.
Because I had not a whole nother show prepared yet, but I had maybe 2 or 3 stories ready to cover. Hadn't decided on a thumbnail, but with this dropping right around the time I was going to go live, I'll throw this on the thumbnail, and that is in the works. It'll be changed on YouTube if it hasn't already been changed. And she just sent me the graphic, so I'm going to update it on everywhere else. Thank you, Aaron, for that. Aaron is always doing great work for RBN.
GOP lawmakers went on the record before the first ballot.
Let's listen. She's saying something if it went to a second ballot. I want to see what they're saying about a second ballot here.
Safe to say, as I leave this off, Chad, that in a second ballot there would be likely less support for Jordan?
That will be going in the
that's
wrong
what
way.
we've been told, that they said, okay, we're going to give you one shot here, maybe two, so maybe that second ballot. And this is where the timing question is so important. Is it better to go right away? Well, obviously they're not going right away. Does it get worse if they take more of a timeout?
Got it. Chad Program on the Hill for us. We will get back to you shortly as we see how this plays out. Thank you. All right, John.
All right, let's bring in the Wall Street Journal columnist and Fox News contributor, Bill McGurr. And Bill, thank you for being with us. Seems a little incongruous being here in a war zone and
so yeah, they are in a war zone. So I'll bring that down. But let me see if the graphic has been updated. I like this graphic. And then we're going to get to some other stories. I do want to check in with CNN and maybe MSNBC just to see the reaction. Because they look like they adjourned the House. So just to see the reaction, I want to check in with both of those places. Yeah, okay. So it's updated there. I'll change it. I'll change it on a, what is it called? Rumble. Now, Rumble has been our, so I do want to say this to our Rumble people. Rumble has been our sort of, what's the right word to say? Oops. Where's my downloads? Rumble has been our sort of our, like, if something happens on YouTube, what's the right word to say here? I'm not saying it the right way. Rumble is our backup, is our backbone. Not backbone, I wouldn't say that. Is our safety net. Let's do it that way. Is our safety net. So we do appreciate the people who follow us on Rumble, because that is our safety net anytime. And it's happened twice so far where we gotten strikes and suspended on YouTube. Now, those strikes have been reversed, but do want to start just giving a special shout out to them. The other thing before I get into this story is, let's take this down and go from this. I was listening to a radio station on the way home from dropping my daughter from school, and I like to listen to conservative talk more than I like to watch it, because you get the more details about their perspectives. And I must say, the pro-Palestinian protest, the pro-Palestinian outrage on social media has reached these conservatives, because they talk about it all the time, and they were talking about it today, and I thought it was interesting. All right, so I guess I'll start with mine. I'll start with mine and go work backwards, sort of like a Rachel Maddow show. She always does that. She starts from one point. All right, so I'll start here, and you can see Emma's tweet there. 1 second. Let me get everything set up here. And I do want to show everybody the updated one, because anytime you see the straight out of Compton, anytime you see this, that usually means that there wasn't enough time to wait for the graphic before the time I was going to go live. But now the graphic has been updated. This is the actual graphic for today, Speaker of the House, and then you see Donald Trump, because that's how Democrats view, and Democrats in the establishment view, is basically Jim Jordan would be like installing Donald Trump as Speaker, and at least that's the way they're trying to paint it. But let's go Crystal and Emma. Show blind spots on Palestinian issue. Let's do that. I think that's a good way, a nice way of calling this segment that we're going to be starting here. I might do this, and I think I have one other story. That one isn't as prepped, but I still want to cover it. And of course, we'll look up some updates on Palestine after we do that, which is a lot. My feed is fucking pretty based. My feed is pretty based. So we'll get to that in just a moment here. All right, but let's first get to this story. And Aaron, you can start here. So today, one of the first sort of tweets I saw was this one. Actually, let me zoom in. You see mine there. I'll come back to mine in just a second. Was this one right here from Crystal? And from Emma. Now I noticed it because, and it's probably like in my feed because I follow Case Study QB. And shout out Case Study QB. We're going to be watching this clip in just a second. And, I thought, oh, okay, so Crystal, because I'm going off what Emma's assessment of this exchange. And I'm looking, oh, this is conservative. It says News Nation. I'm like, oh, this is conservative. Crystal Ball's on there. She's obviously considered the far-right radical leftist who's defending Palestine. She must be saying some good things. So let me watch this. She describes it this way, and this is Emma Vigeland from Majority Report. And I didn't know this initially, but I guess she used to be on TYT first, and then she went to the Majority Report. But anyway, great job, Crystal Ball. Little by little, the left is winning over minds on this issue. Or at least that's what I have to believe. So keep that context. At least the left is winning over minds. So we're going to be looking for what indication that they're winning over minds and what indication that this is a great job. So let's examine it from that lens here. Let's pause it. Let's rewind it. And like I said, it looks like this is News Nation. And let's listen to the exchange. They start out with hang on, let me think. Actually, no. Let's start out with this one here. I forgot I'm already in the segment. Let's go with this one here and listen.
The war in Yemen is in its 19th month of truce. For now, the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
Well, I'll tell you
what
mistake he made, which is also the same mistake that Biden made, which is also the same mistake that Trump made, was to try to pretend like the Palestinian quote unquote issue didn't exist, that you didn't have millions of people in Gaza seething under a multi-year blockade, that you didn't have illegal settlements and occupation in the West Bank, that you did not have to deal with these.
You notice in several interviews that I've covered, not just Crystal Ball, I've said this many times with Cornel West, somebody else that went on. We were watching. But a propagandist tactic and a propagandist who knows where their bread is buttered, that's weapons manufacturers, pharmaceutical industry. You can hear when your guest is getting to an area that your donors or the people who pay your bills don't want to go, don't want to get out. And you can hear when she starts to say something at a particular point, he's let me get in. And he'll do it. He does it a couple of times. But let's listen to the rest of this and comment.
These millions of people
I hear all that.
who were under an illegal apartheid system. And so you had the Trump administration that moved forward with the Abraham Accords, again, ignoring that situation. You had the Biden administration moving ahead with attempted normalization of Saudi and Israeli relations, all pretending that this problem with the Palestinians did not exist. I think the fact that the world
I hear
forgot that this was unfolding is a key part of the problem here.
My question would be, whose fault is that problem, though? Because you seem to want to blame it on Israel, and you want
to this question here, whose fault is that? Here is where the SOCDEM perspective is the issue. This is where they have a blind spot, I guess you could say. Because the simple and quickest and most correct answer is started in the 1940s when the land was illegally given, carved out parts to Israel. That's where it started. That's not what she's going to say. And then there's going to be some other things I'll have a critique for. But this is the blind spot.
You want to see them take away Israel's right to self-defense.
No, I don't. I don't want to take away their right to self-defense. What I do want to take away is their right to have an apartheid state,
which they don't.
Which they don't.
Come on, Crystal. Come on, Crystal.
Leland,
no.
right now, hold on. Let me just say.
Go ahead.
Let me just say. What Hamas did, terrorists, massacre,
thank you. That's
horrendous.
This right there. What Hamas did, terrorists, all these descriptions. So when I saw this video and you see the description of Emma, great job. I'm like, the audacity. How dare you say this is a great job? And I'll now read my tweet and I'll go back to the video. I'm like, good Lord, these NATO left morons are unbearable. Emma, this isn't a great job. Let me see who's messaging me here. Uh-oh. Okay, so anyway, I want to include that, but Nick did send some receipts. Good Lord, these NATO left morons are unbearable. Did I spell bearable? Emma, this isn't a great job by Crystal. Calling Palestinian resistant tactics terrorist attacks shows that, like other white liberals, they lack the ability to see Israel as a colonial project, and resisting against a colonial project is not a terror attack. Sabby, good old great Sabby comes in with this receipt. Sabby says, CJ, this says it all. Look at the sign. Saving lives in Israel. And Sabby takes me, hey, they donate to Israel, right? So, love the community. Always with the receipts, because I'm a person, I don't care about giving receipts. If I read something, I'll give. Sometimes if I read the article, but I don't have the need. I don't have that need to have to give a receipt. But it is good, I guess, to have them. And let me rephrase that, because that did come off kind of weird. Meaning that if I read something and I know something, like, for example, if I say this was, there was some bombing in Israel, Israel killed, I don't need to go and show a article to say, oh, I need to prove that line. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. But Nick, for example, is a person who likes to do that and make sure he has receipts. So I hope I clarified that. Receipts do matter. So all right. So back to this. To that point about receipts, though, Sabby with the awesome receipt. In this case, I'm absolutely happy I'm in community with people who do love giving out those receipts, and that's one of them. Let's see, was there another one? I don't think there was not any other receipts here. Oh, it says mute. This account is muted. Oh, if it's muted for a reason, sir. So let's not go there. But let's go back now to the video. Oops, to the video and finish out what is said or the debate that is talked about in the video. We
Problem with
left
the
off at
No, I don't. I don't. Leland,
No,
right
you
now,
accuse people
right
of things
now. Hold on.
Have you
Let
ever
me
lived
just
there?
say. Let me just
Go
say.
ahead.
Let me just say.
Uh-huh.
What Hamas did, terrorists.
Oh, thank you. That's
horrendous.
Huge of you to be able to point out.
Innocent civilians should not be targeted, whether they are innocent Israeli civilians or.
Now, let's say you're a person who thinks this. Even let's say you're Cornel West, because he kind of thinks this. He kind of gives it the same label. Innocent civilians on either side. Let's say you have that understanding. Some of us who are more radical don't have that same understanding. But let's say you're a person who have that understanding. Still, what needs to always be inserted with this you must always start from the point that this is an occupying force, that this land belongs to Palestine. That is the starting point that changes the framing here. Because if you say, well, if somebody came to your house, if I came to your house, whatever hit this guy's name, if I came to your house and I said it's time for you go, and some other entity just said your house is now my house, and you must go, and I start violently attacking you, you fighting back would be a terrorist attack? That's the starting point. And then you can go on. Now, if some innocent civilians are caught up in the fire, then that's absolutely not what, so go ahead and with that spiel. But what's lacking from the SOCDEM perspective, the professional managerial class left, the NATO left, the boutique left, what's lacking from their perspective is the colonial project part of the assessment of the issue. So that's what's lacking, and that's the point that I want to make here. Let's I'm gonna rewind it a little bit more, and play that. Now, that argument that she says is what allows her to go on these shows, though. So I don't know if she knows that, and that's why they cognitively, the professional managerial class NATO left, do this. Where they go and go, oh, like Cornel West. Oh, yeah, this is terrible too. Hamas, this is terrible too, what they're doing. That is what gets them in the door for the interview in the first place. Because if you didn't have that perspective, maybe, you wouldn't even be asked to come on here to do these interviews. So let's listen to the rest of this here.
Hamas did, terrorists.
Oh, thank you. That's
horrendous.
Huge of you to be able to point out.
Innocent civilians should not be targeted, whether they are innocent Israeli civilians or innocent Palestinian civilians,
there's
which
a
you
huge
seem to
difference.
have no issue with.
No, I have a huge issue with it. The fact of the matter is I have lived there for 4 years. I've reported on it. I realize there's an enormous difference in moral clarity between.
Here is the difference that the killers say, which makes them on the right side of killing, on the righteous side of killing, is the result is the same, yes, but we come from a place, our killings come from a place of morality. All the people we're killing are just by accident. All the people you're killing is just intentional. So what he's basically saying, what's the difference here? If a couple of years back, there was an elderly person that took their car and rolled through one of the 3rd Street promenades down in LA and killing a lot of people. Now, if there was a young person who was in that same car and saw his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend with another man and did that, what's the difference? He still plows cars into a crowd of people, either scenario. So what's the difference? But this is the sort of splitting of the hairs of why we kill that these Zionist imperialists say. And I'm going to rewind it back so he can make his full point, and then I'll comment.
There's a
Which you
huge
seem to
difference.
have no issue with.
No, I have a huge issue with it. The fact of the matter is, I lived there, I've lived there for 4 years. I've reported on it. I realize there's an enormous difference in moral clarity between Hamas that targets civilians, which you agree they do, and the Israelis that go out of their way not to target civilians. There is an enormous difference.
They go out of their way not to target civilians, as he says, we're about to crush Gaza. As Israel announces they want to crush Gaza. Let's see if there's any other good receipts being sent here. No. Okay. No. All right. I'm gonna leave that on because it could be some developing things that I'll be sent some receipts. So you'll hear the ringing if I get another message. Let's listen.
Comfort is it to the parents of the 1,000 plus children in Gaza right now who are dead?
Yeah.
That Israel theoretically maybe has less barbaric tactics.
So let me just.
They've already killed more.
Israel theoretically maybe. Emma think this is a good way of defending the topic. Okay. Let's listen some more.
In Gaza than in the horrific Hamas attacks.
So whose
one atrocity does not. One atrocity does not.
Okay, you've said that 3 times now.
Another atrocity.
Whose responsibility is the fact that those civilians are still there? Is the responsibility of the Israelis, or is the responsibility of Hamas that's setting up?
Whose responsibility? Now, this is an apartheid state where everything is controlled by the government of Israel. So just factually and functionally, logistically, the answer to that is Israel controls that because they control everything that goes in and out of Gaza. They control militarily, they control the West Bank, checkpoints everywhere. So what is he talking about here? But she does not. Let's listen to her. Let me say it this way. Let's listen to her response to that.
Up checkpoints to keep civilians as human shields, or is it the responsibility of the Egyptians that won't let them through Rafah, or is
so, and this is another thing they're doing in the media. When we get to the Palestinian update segment, this is another thing they're doing in media. Is that if Egypt does not want to accept refugees, now it's Egypt's fault that these people in Gaza are going to die. Because some random country who has no historical connection, they're supposed to just take people. Amazing. So let's continue.
Or is the responsibility of the rest of the Arab world that will not take a single Palestinian refugee?
Why is it up to the Arab world? The Arab world is not the one that's displacing these people, the Palestinians. And let's see if the professional managerial class left, the NATO left. Let's see what kind of response she has to that.
To allow them to escape a murderous regime in Hamas.
There is plenty of blame to go around. What I will tell you, though, is are you aware that Netanyahu, as a policy, to try to short circuit any efforts at peace and the establishment of a Palestinian state, intentionally propped up Hamas because he saw them as a useful foil.
Now, this is a good point that I guarantee you none of their listeners knew. or watchers, I'm sorry, because this is a television show. I guarantee you, a lot of people who was watching this from his perspective didn't know this part. So let's let her continue to point.
Oil. These are not my words. These are his words. That is why the Israeli people overwhelmingly want him to be out of a job because of that failure, because of the intelligence failure, because of the military failure. And now
he doesn't have a comeback for this. He doesn't have a comeback. So let's listen.
So now we're on to Israeli politics.
We're going to stand by and say it's fine for them to drop white phosphorus on civilians.
Which they haven't dropped anyway.
Yes, they have.
They dropped white phosphorus.
According to Human Rights Watch.
I gotta run. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Even with a milquetoast watered down talking points for Palestine, this guy got shook by that last part. Because again, you hear all the critiques that I have of this perspective that Crystal has is absolutely lacking clarity. It's absolutely lacking the entire story. It's absolutely lacking the correct framing. It's her job to correct that framing by including how this is an occupation. But this point, and let's watch that again, how he flees here, because you see how when he taps on his drink and he picks it up, or he taps on the table, I think, and he picks it up again because he knows he doesn't have a response to this. Let me see where that was. It was right around here, yeah. All right, so right here. He starts flicking his right hand on the pen. He's nervous because he's like, wow, she's saying something that I don't have a response to.
Additionally propped up Hamas because he saw them as a useful foil. These are not my words.
He's nervous right here.
These are his words. That is why the Israeli people overwhelmed.
Because he just said all this stuff about Hamas being terrible. He's like, wait a minute, Netanyahu propped up, he paid for them, right? He did. I don't know if he knew that. Maybe he didn't know that. Because look, again, I think this is a funny response that he gives her.
Intentionally propped up Hamas because he saw them as a useful foil. These are not my words.
Look how nervous
These are his words. That is why the Israeli people overwhelmingly want him to be out of a job because of that failure, because of the intelligence failure, because of the military failure. And now we're going to stand by.
Now we're on to Israeli politics.
We're going to stand by and say it's fine for them to drop white phosphorus on civilians.
Which they haven't dropped anyway.
Yes, they have, according to Human Rights Watch.
I gotta run. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Wait a minute. Wait. Did he say I give you 2 extra minutes, and then he said I gotta go when she said the white phosphorus stuff?
Want him to be out of a job because of that failure, because of the intelligence failure, because of the military failure. And now we're going to stand by.
Now we're on to Israeli politics.
We're going to stand by and say it's fine for them to drop white phosphorus.
I give you 2 extra minutes.
They haven't dropped anyway.
Yes, they have, according to Human Rights Watch.
I gotta run. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Man, looked like the imbecile at the end. But I don't think I need to reiterate the critique I have on this. It's the same critique I have for a lot of what the professional managerial class does. Their threshold of something is just falls short of what I would call something. So if the threshold to call something good is mine is here, their threshold is like here. So for example, this wasn't great work. She got in one good point that he was not able to propagandize verbally against. One. But what was lacking, what was omitted. Now, I don't know if it's because Crystal doesn't know the full story or Crystal just is a Zionist and who believes, now we are here, so let's just let Israel stay here and they have the right to exist from that perspective. Not quite clear on why the people in the professional managerial class left refuses to sort of include this point when they're talking about this as a starting point, because that literally changes how you view any subsequent events. If I tell you I'm in a home invasion, this is literally a home invasion. This the whole sort of thing that's happening with Palestinians. This is like a home invasion robbery. So, but if you start from the point in the home invasion robbery story from the victims getting untied, going to the kitchen and grabbing knives, and if you start from that point, that slants the story. That's why it's important to say, wait a minute, this is a home invasion robbery, and the homeowners are the ones that are attacking. That completely changes the framing, and that's why it's so important that they include that. I do want to check out some responses here. And again, this is not wow, there's more. I don't know if I can watch more of this. I don't know if I can watch more. Yeah, no. So apparently there's more. Wow, there's more of this. I can't even imagine. There's no way I'm watching, because that was 3. That seemed like a full segment. So I don't know what he means there was more. That would seem like he ended the segment. Unless they started. Oh. They start from. No, because they did start with a clip. So maybe there's more before the clip. Because it does start with them watching a CNN clip with Jake from the State Department. So yeah, I think that's the case. All right, let's now check on the update of what's going on in Israel. I'm just gonna quickly kind of get through this. My daughter has a minimum date again today. They have parent conferences. So parents go in, and like all the parents have conferences with the teachers this week. I don't know if that's the thing that happens in other states, but in California, at least Southern California, they have these times when whereas an entire week is usually October, November. Entire week is an absurdly early day, and that's so it's almost half the day they do the regular teaching, and then they make space for parents to go in and talk to teachers. So that's what's happening this week, and that's why my schedule is slightly different, where I'm coming to you a little bit early and leaving you a little bit earlier also. So let me refresh my feed. Let's go through it and let's see if there's any other breaking stories that needs to be reported before I get out of here. And then there is one other story. I do want to see what other breaking stuff there is before I get to my final story. Every single death. So here goes Nick. Actually, let's cover some Palestinian updates. Let's do that. So I think that's what I said. I don't know what I'm doing. In the end. Okay, so let's go through it and see what are some of the latest going on in Gaza and in Palestine. Let me change the banner here. Where's my RBN Live? RBN Live. Man, that was a great episode last night. Anyway, I'll talk about that at the end. Let's go through some Palestinian items here. Is that what's on the page? All right, so you can kind of see a little bit of it already, but let me do this. Palestinian. Let's go through it and see what the latest is here. I'm waiting for it to completely open. All right, now the little thing is gone. Okay, so let's check out this one here. This one is from Democracy Now! Actually, let me do a better intro for Aaron here. I'll do a better one for you, Aaron, to make your job easier by putting a banner up too. So let's just call this Palestine update, everybody. And let's together go through some of what are the latest news, the latest casualty toll, if I can find that. So Aaron, you can start here with this Palestine update. Let's see what's happening. This one says so this is a Jewish American speaking. She's part of a human rights watch, and this is Sarah Bashi. So let's listen to what she says.
I'm Israeli Jewish American as well. My partner is Palestinian, and I can do things that he can't do. I can travel quite freely, and even though his mother is a refugee from what is now Israel, he can't pass areas that are off limits to Palestinians. I have excellent rights. I have health. There are cities in Israel being built for Jews only, and also in the West Bank, settlements being built for Israeli Jews only, while Palestinians are hemmed in, unable to build cities, and their homes are being demolished for lack of permits that are almost impossible to get. The Israeli authorities are engaging in forcible transfer, where they remove Palestinian communities in the West Bank to make room for settlements. All of these are part of the root causes of the violence. And if the only thing I can hope is that U.S. policymakers.
Why couldn't Cristobal say that? Just include that in your debates. NATO left people, professional managerial class left people. Let's get back to this.
Will realize that it's not quiet here. There's terrible abuses going on. You just have to listen to what people on the ground are telling you and adjust accordingly. No U.S. policy toward Israel-Palestine will be successful if it doesn't address the abuses on the ground first, second, and third.
So that's from Democracy Now!
I'm Israeli Jewish American as
so this is an example of what I was saying. Crystal could have said, well, when she was on that show, well, Newsmax guy, anchor guy, let's start with the Nakba. And here's Vijay Prasad. Israel's war against Palestine started from the Nakba 1948 and then escalated onward into the longest war crime in modern history. See my article. He wrote an article. Maybe I'm going to pop it up in the background. If I have time, I'll bring it up. But that is, I guess, the preface of his article. Let's see if he has anything else here. Let's see what else we can look at here. Now, a Palestinian teacher with Israeli citizenship was just fired from her job for merely following on Palestinian Instagram. Oh, now I understand. On Palestinian. So for following that on Instagram, soldiers are checking who Palestinians are following and what they have on their phones as they cross military checkpoints. Rabid totalitarianism. Did you hear that? Let me zoom in on that there. So you're following somebody. You're following somebody on social media, and that is cause to get you removed or get you fired. Following Israel. Let's see if anything pops up here. TikTok. I am getting stories of Israel is telling people to delete your Instagram. Wow, to delete your Instagram. Sorry, I don't find a story that I can bring up here as a receipt for anyone. I was just checking to see. So let's move on. Let's see if she has a receipt in this one here. I was like, what? Jeezy. No. Mass arrests in the West Bank and Palestinians with Israeli citizenship. Lawyers and doctors are even having their licenses revoked and arrested over social media posts. Wow. Let me see. Licenses revoked. There has to be a story on that. Licenses revoked, social media, let's see, is real. I'm trying, guys, to see if I find something. No, the ones I'm finding is somebody being fired in the United States. Okay, so not able to find anything for that. Let's continue with the update. 10-year-old boy, Palestinian child, arrested by police. 1,000 of children in occupied Palestine are routinely abducted and tortured by Israeli soldiers and police, blindfolded, beaten, their bones broken, or worse, they can be held for long periods without charge. Some never reappear again, and this is showing footage of that. I'm not gonna get a close-up of that because that's what got JB's channel removed or demonetized. So here is Nelson Mandela's son, who was on here. Nick interviewed him. Let's see what he has to say about what's going on in Palestine. Now, he's a staunch pro-Palestinian, down with the struggle, understands what's going on. Let's listen.
To our Palestinian brothers and sisters, leadership of the Palestinian resistance, comrades and friends in the international solidarity movement, we send you revolutionary greetings from South Africa. Apartheid South Africa is no more, and the end of apartheid in occupied Palestine is inevitable. We join the millions of voices around the world who have come out in support of your just struggle. It was the support of the Palestinian people for our own struggle that enabled our march to liberation. The support of the international community, especially the Cubans who offered up to 3,500 martyrs in Angola and commandeered the Battle of Quito Guanavale, which was a decisive step. Their support of our armed struggle broke the apartheid South African regime's air of invincibility. That moment has arrived in the Palestinian struggle, and it is irreversible, even if apartheid Israel razes Gaza to the ground and commits crimes against humanity, with full support of the West and in violation of international law. Apartheid Israel's psyche has been shattered, and its days of unilaterally acting with impunity is now numbered. We must once again rally together to bring an end to the illegal occupation and deliver a crushing blow to the apartheid Zionist regime of Israel, to the mothers and fathers who are burying their innocent children and family members. The blood of the martyrs nourishes the tree of freedom. We demand an end to apartheid Israeli war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide in Gaza and all of occupied Palestine. We stand with you until the end of occupation and until freedom dawns. Amandla!
So that's Nelson Mandela's grandson, or is it great grandson? Let me make sure I said that right. Grandson, yeah, Nelson Mandela's grandson. And that was from the
To our
Middle
Palestinian
East
brothers and
Eye.
sisters.
That was from the Middle East Eye. Here is the right to exist of any Jewish state or Zionism is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine by the genocide of Palestinian people, a crime against humanity. You can't use anti-Semitism as a fig leaf to cover it up. So wow. Wow. Just insanity. This one here, his entire head exploded and his brain was out. A Palestinian child recounted the moment Israel bombed an area in his neighborhood in the Nuseirat camp in Palestine, Gaza. I'm not gonna play the child, but that's the child describing it. The just traumatic. There's no other way to describe something like that. That it has to be extremely traumatic. I can't even think of something more traumatic than that. Let's not show this one. I'll just scroll by. That's a child. Palestinian father searches for his children under the rubble of their home after being targeted in a Israeli raid. He's searching for his kids. I don't want to put anything up graphic, so I want to make sure. But this is what this is. He's searching for his kids in the rubble.
عبود عبد الله سامع صوت انت عبود لا عبد الله لا اله الا يما رد علي يما عبود عبد الله.
This is why the media is doing what they're doing, which is giving one-sided stories, lies, mistruths, not telling entire stories about what's happening. Is because they know these images, there's no way they can hold these images in Gaza and not let them out. So people are getting the real story about what's happening. So they have to get ahead of that story, or they have to counter it at this point. And because they hear and see the protests, the people that are against the dissent, I should say. Let me just encompass everybody. The people that are dissenting this massacre by Israel. If you're looking to read books on Palestine that debunk every Israeli myth and instead presents Palestinian history from the mouth of Palestinians themselves, there are two excellent books. The Palestinian Nakba, and this one says just Nakba, Palestine 1948 and the Claims of Memory. So those are some books. I'm actually going to retweet that. There. Let's see any other item here. So, wow. Now, I'm sure everybody has seen this, or maybe because this is not a newer video. So, let me read the caption. CCTV footage shows Israeli forces raiding a Palestinian shop and checking the phone of the vendor to see if he has posted anything in support of Gaza. Wow. They don't want the story of what's happening. The only reason to do that is because you don't want the story of what's really happening to get out. There's no other reason to do that. Wow. I gotta find article. He must have posted something. I don't understand. How do you argue this side? How do you argue the side of Israel? You have to just completely disregard all of these mountain of evidence in order to do that. That's more graphic stuff I'm not going to show. Free Palestine, unconditional solidarity to the Palestinian people until their self-determination is respected. A liberation war is inevitable. That's just a graphic. Here goes it says, blacks must support Palestine. Black Lives Matter has long stood with Palestinian cause, and it continues to do so in the face of Israeli-Hamas war. So let's listen to this short video. It's about a minute long, showing that support or talking about that support and solidarity here.
The other thing I'll say is Palestine is our generation in South Africa. And if we don't step up boldly and courageously to end the imperialist project that's called Israel, we're doomed. And I think that I had learned about Palestine for a long time. I'd known about it, been wanting to travel, and I was really, really grateful when the Dream Defenders asked me to come on the delegation. But nothing would have prepared me for the level of militarization and the level of violence that we would witness those 10 days inside of Palestine. Nothing would have prepared me for the ways in which we witness people's terror. People live in terror on a daily basis. And nothing would have prepared me for how much clarity I would have on why we have to be a part of Palestinian solidarity.
Sorry, his wife is in the room. I had it on mute, so I wanted to make sure. All right, so let's listen. Or I'm sorry, that last video or this video. I need
our
to,
generation in South Africa.
Palestine is our generation, South Africa. The previous generation fight against apartheid was South Africa, and that fight was won, or that fight. Yeah, okay. Let's describe it that way. That fight was won. Let's move on from there. CEO of former. It says CEO of my former employer, Google, has posted twice about events in Palestine in the past week. First, to voice concern for Israeli workers in Google Israel office. Second, to call out anti-Semitism, but not a word about Palestinians or Palestinian Google workers. That sounds very capitalist of him. the security at a friendly football match between Egypt and Algeria in the UAE asked an Algerian supporter to leave the stadium because she was wearing a Palestinian flag. Wow. And they want Egypt to take Palestinians, though.
وهي لابسه درابوطة فلسطين هو جاي نحو لها في درابوطة فلسطين داروا لها تيان تردين
Some people don't care about her wearing that flag. They're still paying attention to the game as she's getting kicked out. And even as she's leaving, they're not even paying attention to her. When you're on the right side, you don't have to do things like this. When you're in the right, I'm going to skip the children thing. When you are in the right, you don't need to do anything like that. Here goes Palestinian action. And if you hadn't heard, Colombia has kicked the Israeli ambassador of the country out of the country due to the ongoing genocide against Palestinian people. This is the correct response. Yeah, if you hadn't heard, that had happened, and you may see some video. I might get to some video in just a moment here about that. Here goes another one. The Israeli, let me see if the writing is on the side. It doesn't do that anymore. The Israeli occupation forces have arrested Dr. Dala Abu Amini, the Palestinian artist and researcher in the field of brain science and neuro something. Dala was arrested due to a post she shared on Facebook account in which she expressed her condemnation of the ongoing aggression against Gaza. Wow. Wow. I wonder why I can't find any stories on that. I'll look so far when I Google. This guy, John Cusack, man. Here goes an update. This is from yesterday. So here goes one of those tweet updates that I was speaking of. Let's see what the update is stated here. Gaza update. More than 1,000 Palestinian children in Gaza have been killed by Israeli attack. Additional children are unaccounted for and missing under the rubble of destroyed buildings, indicating the true death toll is much higher. And remember, we just showed a video of a father looking through the rubble for his kids. So that death toll is absolutely going to climb a lot larger. The German police have continued their intense crackdown on Palestinian solidarity across the country, arresting and assaulting protesters. The crackdowns have targeted people who have chanted pro-Palestinian slogans. Let's watch. This is a short video, less than 15 seconds. I'll rewind and let's see. I'm playing it one more time. This is what police are for. This is why police can never be considered part of workers. They're here to disrupt the workers. So anyway, let's continue. That's an older update I played yesterday. Here goes Torah Judaism. This is who tweeted this. The Jews will continue to organize a support campaign for the Palestinian cause despite all kinds of pressure. We do not recognize the existence of Israel. We will fight with Palestinians against Zionism until all the occupied lands are returned to Palestine. So let's listen.
لما نرضى المرضى اليوم نكبر بها علي السبابة والنديم ما احنا قلب الشهادة ولا ما حمست نادي بالله بها. واو انت حماس يعني. حماس. حضروا يا رأي حضروا يا لله لا للسلطة والشهراء ولا للجاه. من وين انت؟ احنا مشينا ممكن وملكونا لا نحمي الغاية حركة توالي أنا من فلسطين وأحب ترامي من ضربك بالأطياء. نمنع طرفة بإسرائيل يسلح فيها. ناديهم عم يتحولوا فشرت إسرائيل خبت رملة وأنتم ترجعون الدين من أحياء الشريف.
Wow. Just in case somebody who speaks the language wanted to get the full video, there you go. So let's continue. Some more visualization. So let's look at this one. Here goes the border. It says, why does Egypt keep the border with Gaza closed? Why are there more Palestinian refugees in Jordan than in Palestine? Why doesn't Lebanon grant citizenship to Palestinian refugees? Do Arab countries really support Palestine? So this is the person saying, "Oh, why?" Because this is again, you got to think it from a colonial project. Whatever way to get these people out of this country is the point. So they want to make it seem like, why don't you take your people? What do you mean? Your people, the people belong there on their land where they are now. And here is sort of a map that you can see. Where is it? So we got Lebanon bordering here, Syria here, Jordan, Gaza Strip is down here. I don't know. And then Egypt. Yeah, Egypt, of course. No. But let's continue. See if there's any other breaking news. This one says, so it says, reckless reporting costs lives. Words can kill. Palestinian ambassador to UK warns the mainstream media about their irresponsible reporting. So let's listen to this one here. I'm going to check my phone if there's any receipts here I'm missing. So let's listen.
And we look to you, the media, to provide the proper context. To be true to your very noble profession. To help set the stage for a fair, just and legal resolution to the Palestine issue in line with international law and resolutions. And this is off script. I have been really taken aback by some of the reporting in the UK and elsewhere. Reckless reporting does cost lives. Words can kill. And we look to you.
Which is true. All right, everybody. I think that's the only all the updates I'm going to be doing now. Let me get going here. I scrolled through enough to see if there was anything that I was missing. It didn't look like I was missing anything, or nothing gigantic had dropped. Today is Tuesday. I'm not sure if anybody else is streaming today. But tomorrow we have Nick at Night, and he has this guest Wyatt Reed will be here tomorrow. So make sure you check that out. Nothing's going on there. All right. I always like to, or not always, but I'm starting to check to see if there's anything that I'm missing before I head out, and it didn't look like anything I was missing. We're going to go ahead and end with this funny video from David Pakman about, actually, I need to make sure I don't have any super chats. Hang on a second. Let me make sure I don't have any super chats before I leave here. Any new ones before I take off? Yeah, I got 2 that I need to read. So let me read these super chats, and then we're going to end with this funny David Pakman video. So here is this one here. 3, actually, not 2. DC again, 500 plus killed in an Israeli airstrike on Gaza hospital. Yes, Nick, I saw Nick's tweet on that. Maybe we showed it earlier. I can't remember if we showed it earlier. But yes, I did see that. Here's another one. Thank you for your support. And I think it's pronounced Adai or AD. I really do support and respect your channel when it comes to this ongoing war. Please change your unrehearsed approach. Yes, when covering Israel, we normally have planned segments. So that is very, 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 very true. As far as that critique. And a Biden 71 also with the super sticker, always showing some love. And that was the 3 that was the most updated since the last time I read, I should say. And all right, let's get that off the screen. And now I'll go ahead and go to the David Pakman video. And thank you for watching today. I am
running mate for vice president, who is a total extremist. If you regularly watch or listen to this show, you know this is not a show where I will cheerlead anything that has a supposedly progressive stamp on it. If you want a show like that, there are many shows like that. Okay, I don't even need to name them for you. You can find those. I am going to be completely upfront that when there is a critique I need to make of something that is supposedly progressive, I will make it. And Jill Stein has chosen Ajamu Baraka as her running mate for the presidency on the Green Party ticket. We've already talked about Jill Stein's anti-science views, the Green Party's pro-homeopathy views. Okay, fine. What about Ajamu Baraka? Well, he's written that President Obama and other members of the black petite bourgeoisie are merely puppets, living proof that the white supremacist machine has hijacked the minds of black people. Okay. Also wrote an article on his blog titled Paris Attacks and the White Lives Matter Movement, where he argues that France, Belgium, and other nations that have been affected by terrorism effectively got what they deserved, saying while the victims of the violence in Paris may have been innocent, France was not, he wrote, because the crimes committed against Arabs, Muslims, and Africans and the horrors of colonialism and the concerted effort by the French and US authorities to fund extremist groups in the Middle East are to blame for the woes of Western societies. According to Baraka, the Sanders campaign didn't offer a genuine program for radical change. I mean, we're talking about free education, government-provided healthcare. That apparently was not radical enough because it was tacitly committed to Eurocentrism and, as he says, the Bernie Sanders campaign normalized white supremacy. He's written on his blog that Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad isn't a bad guy, who was, after all, reelected by big margins, and that he is not engaged in any war crimes against his people, demonstrably untrue. He went on Kevin Barrett's Truth Jihad podcast, which is basically a 9/11 truther podcast, and said that some recent airline crashes were false flags, that the Democratic Party is white supremacist, and he is also saying that the U.S. is intentionally supporting ISIS. Now, we've talked about how weapons get to groups that the U.S. claims to oppose, but to flat out say the U.S. is flat out supporting ISIS is a bit further than most rational sort of thinkers are willing to go. If this is the